Good evening and welcome. Tonight, I'm going to read to you some articles out of History Magazine. And these articles were chosen by my channel members. The members that picked these articles were Will and Laura T. Thank you very much. And if you, yes you, would like to choose articles out of History Magazine for me to read, you can click the join button down there. Or if you're on mobile and it's not appearing, you can go to the description box and click the very first link. And that leads you to my channel memberships, where for only 99 US cents per month you get all kinds of behind the scenes secret stuff, and you even get to watch all of my uploads before they're public. So if you want all of that and the ability to pick articles, feel free to join. Tonight's theme is going to be artifacts that you've probably never heard of, starting with the Red Sea Scrolls. Now, you didn't read that wrong. It's not the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's the Red Sea Scrolls. Not terribly far from the Dead Sea, but completely different. This is the world's oldest papyri. And as we're going to learn, is pretty much the world's oldest journal. So let's dive in and see what this is all about. I'll read first and then we'll go through all the pictures and look at them. Located on the Egyptian coast of the Red Sea, Wadi al-Jarf is a quiet, unassuming place today. Dry desert sands and placid blue waters stretch out as far as the eye can see. Across the water, one can spy the Sinai Peninsula. This seeming tranquility masks the busy hub it once was more than 4,000 years ago. Wadi al-Jarf's historical importance was cemented in 2013 when 30 papyri, the world's oldest, were found hidden away in man-made limestone caves there. Aside from their age, the so-called Red Sea Scrolls are remarkable for their contents. Not only do they reveal Wadi al-Jarf's distant past as a bustling port, they also contain eyewitness accounts of a man named Merer who took part in the building of the Great Pyramid of Pharaoh Khufu. The Wadi al-Jarf site was first discovered in 1823 by an English traveler and antiquarian, John Gardner Wilkinson, who believed its ruins to be a Greco-Roman necropolis. Then, in the 1950s, two archaeology-loving French pilots, François Bisset and René Chabot-Morisseau, stumbled upon the site again. They suggested that it had once been a center for metal production, but the 1956 Suez Crisis delayed further investigation. It wasn't until 2008 that work at the site resumed. French Egyptologist Pierre Tellet led a series of excavations that definitively identified Wadi al-Jarf as an important port that dated back some 4,500 years to the reign of Khufu and the building of the Great Pyramid. Tellet's teams revealed that Wadi al-Jarf was a vibrant economic hub at the center of the trade in materials used to build the pyramids, some 150 miles away. Supporting the archaeology was the landmark find of Merer's diary among the papyri. Pyramid Port. The Wadi al-Jarf site consists of several different areas spread over several miles between the Nile and the Red Sea. From the direction of the Nile, the first area, about 3 miles from the coast, contains some 30 large limestone chambers used for storage. It was in these caves that the papyri were discovered. Continuing east toward the sea for another 500 yards, a series of camps appears, and after those a large stone building divided into 13 parallel sections. Archaeologists surmised that the building was used as a residence. Finally, on the coast is the harbor itself, with dwellings and more storage spaces. Using pottery and inscriptions found at the site, archaeologists have been able to date the harbor complex to Egypt's 4th dynasty, some 4,500 years ago. They believe the harbor was inaugurated in the time of Pharaoh Snefru and abandoned around the end of his son Khufu's reign. It was active for a short period, but during that time the port was devoted to building Khufu's tomb, known then as Akhet Khufu, meaning horizon of Khufu. Along with the papyri, many other important archaeological finds there have revealed the importance of the port. Large structures, like the 600-foot-long stone jetty, show deep material investment in the area. Talay and his team uncovered some 130 anchors, whose presence implies a busy harbor. From the harbor, called the Bush by the ancient Egyptians, the pharaoh's ships would sail across the Red Sea to the copper-rich Sinai Peninsula. Copper was the hardest metal then available, and the Egyptians needed it to cut the stones for their pharaoh's massive pyramid. When Egyptian ships returned to port, they were loaded with copper. Between voyages, the ships were stored in the limestone chambers. Treasures in the caves. After the Wadi al-Jarf harbor was decommissioned around Khufu's death, records show that a team was sent from Giza to close the storage spaces carved into the limestone. They were known as the escort team of the Uraeus of Khufu in its prow, which most likely refers to a ship bearing the Uraeus, or protective cobra, on its prow. During the process of blocking up the limestone caves, mirrors, now obsolete papyrus documents, likely became lodged among the stone blocks. They remained in the desert air for some 4.5 millennia until their discovery during an excavation by Talay in 2013. The first batch of Red Sea scrolls was found on March 24th that year, near the entrance to the storage space designated G2. The second and largest set of documents was found 10 days later, wedged between blocks in storage space G1. There are several types of documents among the Red Sea Scrolls, but the writings of Merer caused the most excitement. The leader of a working party, Merer kept records of its activities in his diary. It is a daily record of the work his team carried out over a 3-month period during the construction of the Great Pyramid. Merer's team consisted of some 200 workers who traveled across Egypt and were responsible for carrying out all tasks related to the construction of the Great Pyramid. Among the most interesting were the limestone blocks used for the pyramid's cladding. Merer recorded in great detail how the team retrieved them from the quarries of Tura and brought them by boat to Giza. Merer's men would load the limestone blocks into boats, transport them up the Nile, and watch them when they were tallied in an administrative area before being taken to Giza. A fragment from the diary records the 3-day journey from the quarry to the pyramid's site. Day 25. Inspector Merer spends the day with his Zah, or team, hauling stones in South Tura. Spends the night in South Tura. Day 26. Inspector Merer sets sail with his men from South Tura, laden with stone blocks, to Akhet Khufu, the Great Pyramid, spends the night in Shekufu, which is the administrative area with storage space for the Ashlars, just before Giza. Day 27, embark at Shekufu, sail to Antikythera laden with stones, spends the night at Antikythera. The next day, Merer and his workers returned to the quarry to pick up a new shipment of stones. Day 28, set sail from Antikythera in the morning, navigate up the river towards South Tura. Day 29, Inspector Merer spends the day with his Zaw hauling stones in South Tura, spends the night in South Tura. Day 30, Inspector Merer spends the day with his Zaw hauling stones in South Tura, spends the night in South Tura. Merer's diary even gives a glimpse of one of the pyramid's architects, Ankaf, Khufu's half-brother, held the position of head of all the king's works. One of the papyrus fragments states, Day 24, Inspector Merer spends the day with his Zaw, hauling, text missing, with people in elite positions, Aper teams, and the noble Ankaf, director of Rosh Kufu. Working men. Merer also carefully kept track of how his crew was paid. Since there was no currency in pharaonic Egypt, salary payments were made generally in measures of grain. There was a basic unit, the ration, and the worker received more or less according to their category on the administrative ladder. According to the papyri, the workers' basic diet was hedge, or leavened bread, pessim, or flat bread, various meats, dates, honey, and legumes, all washed down with beer. It has been long accepted that a large labor force built the Great Pyramid, but historians have long debated the status of this workforce. Many have argued that the workers must have been enslaved, but the Red Sea Scrolls contradict this notion. Merer's detailed payment records demonstrate that those who built the pyramids were skilled workers who received compensation for their services. There's something even more extraordinary in the lines of the frail papyri. In the words of Merer, there's a first-hand account of a person who not only witnessed the building of the pyramids, but whose team was also a crucial part of the everyday business of getting the job done. Because of this discovery, Egyptologists have a detailed and somewhat prosaic snapshot of the final stages of the Great Pyramid's construction. Let's see. Okay. So here we have a little chart of what Tura would have looked like. Right? Well, that's the pyramid right there. That's Antikythera. So now this is Giza. We have, this is Rosh Kufu, Shekufu, Antikythera. The quarries over here, so that's Tura. And then Antikythera, the land on the horizon of Khufu. Interesting. So interesting. Like, that's the pyramid. That's the pyramid. But, like, none of this is here today. This is all Sphinx and other kind of little things that were constructed and archaeological sites. How interesting is that? Wow. Let's look. You can see here the very zoomed in facade of the Great Pyramid. You can see some people hanging out on it. And it talks about how the limestone that is being talked about has all worn away because these pyramids were once white and smooth. So that's all worn down over time, and all that's left is the very, very base of the pyramid with all these building blocks. This is not how it would have looked back when Merer was building it. Let's see, that is Ankaf, looking all dilapidated there in that statue, but you know, he wasn't one of the important ones, was he? In a way, he was. basket of figs here from 14th century BCE. It says this is in the British Museum currently. That's pretty cool. And here is a page of what's left of Mirror's diary. It says this section here is day 5. Inspector Mirror spends the day with his saw loading stones onto the howe belonging to the elite of North Tura. He spends the night in Tura. How fascinating is that? That is so cool. The world's oldest diary. A drawing here of loading the limestone blocks onto the boat there. Let's see who that is. That must be Khufu. Who is this? I guess it's an anonymous worker here. Just some little tiny zoomed in part of, I'm sure, what's a much larger engraving on the wall showing the workers there, I guess. So here's a map. Here's what we're talking about. So Wadi al-Jarf is right here. All the green, I assume, is the kingdom. Yes, the old kingdom. So there's Wadi al-Jarf, and let's see, there's Memphis, Saqqara, Giza. So they're going from here, I guess, sailing up to Tura, and then there's Giza. And there's one of their rafts here. It says this is a picture from Hatshepsut's tomb. And here's some stones left over at the archaeological site, showing how the storage areas were all blocked up by the team that was hired to shut down the port. And the diary was wedged into stones like that. Here's, of course, the pyramids, this one being the Pyramid of Khufu. You can see kind of some of what's left of the early facade there, but it's also very worn down because they're 4,500 years old. And then here's a view of the Red Sea from space. There's the Sinai Peninsula. And then there's the Nile right there. And who's down here? That's Khufu right there. This little statue. This is in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. It says. Then here is the opening page I showed you. This is a snapshot of when they found the Red Sea Scrolls, Mirror's diary. How amazing. Let's move on to our next artifact. I feel like out of all of the unknown artifacts, this is probably the most known one because it's very mysterious. The Treasures of Antikythera. Let me move this magazine out of the way. Okay, there we go. The Treasures of Antikythera. Greek divers gathering sea sponges made a serendipitous find in 1900 after foul weather changed their plans. En route to Tunisia, they were forced to take shelter on Antikythera, an island between mainland Greece and Crete. After the storm subsided, the divers decided to look for sea sponges off Antikythera. One diver, Elias Stadiatis, was astounded to see what he at first thought were human bodies strewn across the seabed. The divers hadn't discovered bodies, but works of art, dozens of classical-era statues of gods, heroes, and men. Subsequent investigations revealed a shipwreck site with even more treasures, including the corroded remains of a mysterious geared mechanism that some say is the world's first computer. The Antikythera device, or Antikythera mechanism. Diving into the past. Requiring stamina and strength, sponge diving was a key maritime activity in the ancient Aegean world. Sponges were referenced in the epic poems of Homer. The more modern divers on that 1900 mission not only found, but later, in a global first, helped salvage one of the most significant shipwrecks ever discovered. The statues on the wreck lay at a depth of around 180 feet. By 1900, sponge divers were using diving suits, and such depths were just within their range. The team was able to reach the seafloor and brought a life-size bronze arm fragment to the surface. Keeping the location of the wreck a secret, The crew's captain, Demetrios Kontos, alerted authorities in Athens and showed them the bronze arm as proof of the discovery. Kontos was excited about the find and hoped his divers might put their skills to work on the archaeological recovery. The Greek government was receptive. War, financial woes, and political instability were taking a toll on the nation. Salvaging a shipwreck whose cargo was filled with reminders of the country's past glories would do wonders for national morale. Having secured a promise that his men would be hired for the salvage work, Kontos revealed the shipwreck's exact location only after setting out for Antikythera, accompanied by the Greek Navy. Supervised by the Department of Antiquities, work began in November 1900 and stretched into 1901. After dangerous conditions halted the team, casualties included 2 divers who were paralyzed and 1 fatally from decompression sickness. Kontos and the remaining crew recovered most of the cargo, and the treasures were taken to the National Archaeological Museum of Athens. Luxuries in transit. The cargo ship, with a capacity of around 300 tons, had wrecked off Antikythera around 70 to 60 BCE, but its cargo ranged in age from the 4th to the 1st century BCE. Coins found on the vessel suggest it might have come from the island of Delos in the eastern Aegean, or from Pergamon or Ephesus on Turkey's western coast. The destination was probably Italy, where the Roman elite were hungry for Greek luxuries and artwork. Among the rich collection of exceptionally realistic bronze sculptures, which you can see here, we'll look at them in a minute, were these statues. Hold on. So you can see. Look like this. Were the statues of Phoebe of Antikythera, which was produced between 340 to 330 BCE, and the so-called philosopher from 230 BCE. There are also 36 marble sculptures in different sizes and states of preservation. These include a large, initially headless statue of Hercules, recovered in the 1900 dive, whose head was finally found on the seabed in 2022. Divers also unearthed 3 life-size marble horses, jewelry, coins, and glassware. Another major excavation occurred decades later in 1976. Directed by French oceanographer Jacques Cousteau, the team recovered more works of art, including the statue known as the Boxer, and also brought up pieces of the ship for study. Their underwater footage of the wreck would prove valuable to future expeditions. Antikythera yielded more discoveries in the 21st century. Advances allowed for more detailed mapping of the site, and recent expeditions have revealed other wreckage along the island's coast. The Wheels of Time. Perhaps the most intriguing discovery at Antikythera was its most unassuming. In 1901, pieces of corroded metal recovered with the cargo barely attracted notice. In 1902, the Greek Minister of Education, Spiridon Stais, realized the scraps looked mechanical, similar to the kind of toothed gears found in modern machines. The unprecedented find, now known as the Antikythera mechanism, has fascinated scholars for more than a century. Its 82 fragments were once a functioning astronomical device that could predict the positions of the sun, moon, and planets. Sometimes described as an early analog computer, it is by far the oldest geared mechanism known to date. Its exact age is still a mystery. Archaeologists can safely say it is the same vintage as the shipwreck from 70 to 60 BCE, but some speculate it could date to 200 BCE. Study of the wreck and its treasures continues. More may be revealed in the years to come. I'm going to read to you this box up here, more about the actual mechanism. calculating the heavens. It's been established that the Antikythera mechanism showed the movement of celestial bodies. Now researchers have learned more about how the shoebox-sized device achieved that technological feat. In 2021, a team from University College London, held by Tony Freeth, studied all 82 fragments, 3 of which are shown here. This is the most famous one. Based on what was known of astronomy at the time, as well as inscriptions on the mechanism itself, they proposed a theoretical model. So this is what they think it looked like. There's all the details that's inside. Powered by a handle, gears drove dials that displayed the positions of the sun, moon, and planets. Other dials showed lunar phases during the 19-year Metonic cycle and the dates of solar and lunar eclipses. I've seen conspiracy stories that it's evidence of time travel because it's so modern looking, right? Or it's aliens, right? It is puzzling. I think it's interesting how this is the only one that's ever been found. You think if this was a staple on ships back then, we would have found more of them. Why was there only one? We don't know. But let's look at some of the other sculptures that were found in the wreck. This is the wrestler. It's missing a lot there. And the boxer. He really looks like he's boxing. He looks terrified, but not as terrified as the philosopher here. Oh my goodness. And there's a Phoebe, which is a gorgeously detailed statue. Look at his hair. Oops. But yeah. And then we have, let's see, that's Odysseus, it says. This is in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. There's a picture of some little divers down there. And then, let's see, this is the mechanism on a Greek postage stamp. And here you can see there's Greece, there's Athens, there's Crete, and that's where Antikythera is located. Alright, let's move on to our last article of the night. Let me see. There we go. This. It's one of my older magazines, so it's really damaged. It got really wet somehow, I'm not sure how. But that doesn't affect the article, so it's okay. We're going to read about Nigerian treasures, the majestic art of Ife. The Yoruba people of Nigeria believe Ife to be a sacred city founded by the gods and the birthplace of humanity. Lying 135 miles northeast of the Nigerian capital Lagos, Ife was where archaeologists uncovered a series of sculptures that revealed a rich yet overlooked history of Yoruba culture to the world. While some were made of metal and others of terracotta, the heads of Ife share a highly symmetrical style. Some faces are adorned with lines and designs, and elaborate hairstyles top their heads. All convey a dignified and imposing majesty. The importance of the human head in the Yoruba cosmology was unknown to the German ethnologist Leo Frobenius, who first saw one of these artworks in 1910. Although his theories regarding the head's origins were underpinned by entrenched racist ideas, his fascination for Yoruba artworks began a change in how the Western world regarded African cultures. The Sacred Grove. Born to a middle-class family in Berlin in 1873, then the capital of the new German Empire, Frobenius spent his childhood and youth reading the chronicles of 19th century explorers, which awakened his fascination for the African continent. Starting in 1904, Frobenius traveled to Africa, returning from trips with thousands of cultural items that he sold to German museums. In 1910, he began his fourth expedition, passing through the territory of the Yoruba. then controlled by British Nigeria. Emerging around 1,000 years ago, Yoruba culture flowered in the region, and its people founded many kingdoms and cities. Today, the Yoruba still make up one of the largest ethnic groups in Nigeria. Frobenius spent about 3 weeks in the city of Ife. Established around the 11th century, Ife was well known for the skill of its artisans. Frobenius knew of the rich culture of the wider area because in 1987 the British had taken elaborate bronzes from the palace of the Kingdom of Benin, a neighbor of the Yoruba. Although Frobenius's knowledge of local culture was thin, he had learned of an artwork in Ife that he believed to be dedicated to the god Olokun, a Yoruba sea deity. He asked to see it and was escorted to a sacred palm grove, where the object lay ritually buried. His hosts unearthed it for him to inspect. He described it as a head of marvelous beauty, wonderfully cast in antique bronze, true to life, encrusted with a patina of glorious dark green. Naming it the Olokun head, Frobenius pressured the priest of the grove to sell it, reportedly for a price of £6. The sale caused consternation among the Yoruba elders, and the matter reached the ears of the British administration. As Germany was a rival colonial power in West Africa, Frobenius's activities were attracting attention. He was forced to return the Olokun head to Ife. He did, however, manage to return to Germany with several terracotta heads from the city. Despite his admiration for these sculptures, Frobenius could not accept that they had been made by Africans. His racism led him to concoct a ludicrous theory that survivors from the legendary Greek island of Atlantis brought their Greek civilization to Africa, which could be seen in Yoruba art. The Yoruba god Olokun, supposedly the figure depicted by the head, was, he said, the Greek sea god Poseidon. The Olokun head, he wrote, had a symmetry of vitality reminiscent of Greece and a proof that, once upon a time, a race far superior in strain to the Negro had been settled here. These ideas were representative of European thinking in the early 20th century. Nigerian archaeologist Ekpo Eyo later wrote that preconceived notions of so-called Western civilization blinded non-African scholars to the fact that complex, sophisticated works of art and culture could come from Africa, revealing the Ife. Because the Olokun head disappeared after its return, it is difficult to know. We'll look at those in a minute. To know with certainty its age. Scholars believe it most likely dated to around 1350. European scholars returned to Ife in search of more bronzes. From ritual resting places, they unearthed numerous terracotta heads, many of which were taken to museums. The most significant find occurred in 1938, when more than a dozen heads were found. Like the lost Olokun head, these were made of a copper alloy, but widely referred to as bronzes. Many can be seen today in Ife's Museum of Antiquities. By 1948, archaeologists had accepted that the heads were the work of Yoruba artisans and not people from Atlantis. The Ife heads played a key role in overturning prejudices that Africa produced only primitive art. Responding to a 1948 exhibition of the heads at the British Museum, a London publication declared, "This African art is worthy to rank with the finest works of Italy and Greece." Study has shown that the regal heads are not gods, but men, the Uni, rulers of Yoruba kingdoms. Wealthy Uni obtained the metals for the artworks by trading gold and ivory along the Saharan routes to Europe. To the Yoruba, the heads are more than just beautiful objects. In Yoruba belief, the head is the home of the Ori, the seat of the soul, and the place where a person's fate is determined. Because of the deep spiritual significance of these and other objects produced in Ife, many Nigerians are advocating for the Ife heads' repatriation, part of a wider debate as to whether African artifacts should be returned to the land that created them. Good point. My argument always is about returning objects to museums where they came from, is if that country's museum is up to par and the political stability of the country is intact, by all means, please return them, you know. Like, if the country is not stable, if, like, that museum could be looted, or if the museum just can't handle those artifacts, then keep them where they are. But I'm pretty sure Nigeria is okay. So here's a photograph of the Olokun head. Isn't that remarkable? Went missing. And tell me how a man looked at this and went, oh, that's Poseidon. Looks enough. That's an African face, dude. That is not Poseidon. I guess he was like, well, if it was the sea god, it's got to be Poseidon, because Poseidon was the Greek sea god. But that's an African face, my goodness. And then here he is on a postage stamp. Funny how that's happened twice in these articles. And then here's some more of the incredible heads. A terracotta head. I love the eyebrows there and the Marge Simpson here. There's another head here. You can see the lines in that one that he was talking about. Here's another head. He's got, looks like, face scars that a lot of cultures do in Nigeria and other parts of Africa. And here's one of the copper alloyed heads. It says it may have once have had a veil attached to it. Very beautiful. This one's my favorite. And here's another incredible bronze head. This is in the National Museum of Ife in Nigeria. So it looks like it was like cast on a real face, you know, it's so beautifully detailed. He wrote on the road to Atlantis. And then here's a map of Nigeria. You can see that's where Lagos is, and that's where Ife is located. There's the capital, Abuja. And that's going to be it for tonight. Let's look at these heads again when I close out the video. They're so beautiful. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this style of content, please consider subscribing. And again, if you want to be the one to choose which articles I read, you can click the join button or the link in the description box. Both lead to the same place. And become a channel member. And again, I set it to the cheapest possible option. And YouTube tells me all the time, you gotta increase your membership prices. You would earn so much more revenue. Never. It's never increasing. It's always going to be the lowest possible, because I want as many people as possible to be able to join without worrying about financial strain. So with that being said, I hope that you found this video relaxing and educational. Look how beautiful his face is. And I hope that you have a